Scleritus fell on Stan Twitter.
Start your sublight engines. It's time for RuPalp's Pod Race, a queer Star Wars podcast. In case you missed it, since we're not covering The Bad Batch Season 3, we started RuPalp's Day Off, our series where we talk about different pieces of non-Star Wars media that we love. Thank you for your patience because the promised episode about Baldur's Gate 3 is finally here. I'm Noah. My pronouns are he, him. You can find me on social media pretty much anywhere at The Jewish Jedi, and my gender this week is Preacher's Hag by Auntie Ethel Kane.
That is so good.
I would listen to her
so much.
I really would. And she is. She was almost a mother. She was almost mother.
I love how one of the states like a buff that you can get. Well, you can't get it, but Ethel has it, like a thing you can hover over, and it just says hag pregnancy. I'm like, that's great.
I love the idea of that wretched woman in that little fuck-ass cheerleader outfit.
Oh my god, wait.
I think she would serve.
Wait. American hag.
Yeah. Like, I think
Please.
she would really give, she's such a weird character. We'll talk about her in a bit, but I have some thoughts about that woman.
So true.
Don't we all? Would.
Now.
Is that your... Huh.
What,
Is that your is that your hall pass?
Did you guys hear that? No, I wouldn't say it's my hall pass. I didn't say anything. I don't know what you guys are talking about.
Anyways, my name is Mel. I use they, them pronouns. You can find me on the internet at Melvin Culpa. And my gender this week is the Dark Ferb. Ferb was my Dark Urge playthrough that I got about, I would say, half an hour into, and then I lost interest and did not finish.
So true.
That's a great way to start our podcast. We love Baldur's Gate. I didn't even finish this fucking playthrough, man.
I'm sorry, I got stressed out because I had school. An hour before we started recording this episode, I was like, let me crack it back into Baldur's Gate. Let me just get my feet wet again, which I did, and it was very fun. But it took like a very, very long time. We had an update to our game, and I just was sat there like, okay, maybe I'll get to see Gaily Poo before we start recording. Perhaps not.
My name is Ollie. I use any pronouns, and you can find me on social media at Ollie Fresh. That's fresh with a PH. My gender this week is Raphael watching Dear Evan Hansen and relating a little bit too much to Evan Hansen and being like, oh my god, he's so me, guys. Like, I just feel like he's doing waving through a window at karaoke, and
Now,
everyone hates it.
Raphael, played by Ben Platt. I actually do see the vision.
Now you see the vision.
However,
I know he's a theater kid and like in a bad way. Because listen, I will say my problematic take is that I don't think it's default bad to be a theater kid. But I feel like there is a way to have done it bad, you know? And he did it the bad way.
I'm sorry, I'm like plagued by thoughts of Raphael singing the soundtrack of Dear Evan Hansen. Do you guys think he makes Harleep do Sincerely Me, like as a duet? Like, do you think that he's like,
oh, wow.
He's like, I lied, we're not having sex, grab the booklet.
Grab the sheet music. No, because here's the problem. I do agree that Raphael is a theater kid. That being said, I think Dear Evan Hansen might be too, like, gauche for him. I think that he thinks that Great Comet got robbed.
See, I don't disagree with you, but here's the thing. Raphael sucks. So I'm like, I feel like he has shitty opinions. Because here's the thing. He's only cosplaying being so, like, such a romantic character. Like, I think that...
What do you mean? I think you should be able to romance him.
Oh my god, stop.
Shut
up.
Here's my thing about Raphael. I think that he thinks that Great Comet got robbed. I think if you ask him why he thinks that, he has nothing to say. Like, he's like... I think he would regurgitate those opinions, but if you were like, oh, like, why? He'd be like, it was robbed.
Josh Groban was great.
No,
yeah.
Literally.
Sorry, oh, no shit. No flowers for Oak. Okay.
So true. No, you're right. You should say it.
No, I also feel like he's a huge Andrew Lloyd Webber stan, like hardcore stan, like is like he saw Bad Cinderella.
What is his favorite song from Cats? What is Raphael's favorite song from Cats?
I feel like it's Macavity. Honestly,
he's like,
fucking
wow.
Bombalurina is singing, and he's like, he saw Taylor Swift do that in Tom Hopper's Cats 2019 and was like, she was perfect casting for this role. Baldur's Gate, what is it? We're here, we're talking about it today. We're talking about Baldur's Gate 3 specifically. Baldur's Gate is an RPG. It is the third, and Baldur's Gate 3 is obviously the third installment, but it is very different from the ones that came before it. It's pretty standalone, so, you know, it's not like you have to play all the other ones to understand it, but there are references and characters that cross over. It takes place in the canonical universe that Dungeons and Dragons takes place in, so the world of Faerun. And if I'm not up to date on my D&D lore, I apologize. But it takes place in the Dungeons and Dragons world. And it's basically a story that surrounds this city of Baldur's Gate and this group of characters. And if you've played D&D, it's going to be a very familiar formula. So you are the player character. You either design your character, you pick a predetermined existing character to play as, and you go through, you make choices, and whenever there's a pivotal choice you have to make, you have to roll dice, and then the amount on the dice will tell you like how well you do, all that stuff. Basically every time you want to do anything in the game, you are in your party of 4, and then you pick 3 of your companions. There's romance, there is intrigue, there's danger, there's all of the kind of things that you look for in an epic fantasy story. So yeah, I mean, that's the core of what the game is, but the premise is kind of that the game starts and there is a huge ship that is being driven by illithids, which are like squid people. You can Google what they are if you are not familiar. And they are basically like kidnapping people and putting tadpoles in their eyes. And then it's about you as someone who's been kidnapped from your home in Baldur's Gate, your character trying to escape and then meeting up with other survivors and trying to figure out like, oh my God, what happened? What do? We got to get these tadpoles out of our brains. And then the intrigue comes from there. And it's a very fun game. It has won a bunch of awards. It's pretty well known at this point. So I think that's kind of the spoiler-free pitch.
I do want to say we are going to get into spoilers for this game. I would also say if you have not played it and you're thinking of doing it, go do that, because playing it without spoilers is a very fun experience. Like, I didn't know very much about it going in. That being said, I have never played traditional Dungeons and Dragons before, so a lot of the terminology used in this game was completely foreign to me, and the game is, I think, actually pretty easy to get into. That said, my first playthrough of this game may have been one of like the worst experiences in gaming that I've ever had, because I was being a capital B buffoon. And I think that it'd be fun to kind of like talk through our like first playthrough experiences. On the bright side, mine is short because I did not finish the game the first time I started it, because I kind of broke it low-key.
It was so funny because Noah had been, like, he'd just gotten it. Mel and I had both already played, either finished it or played a very significant part of it. But it was really funny because Noah was like, spoilers for what's coming up. So I would say if you haven't played the game and care about spoilers, click off now and come back later. But Noah's like, yeah, I'm playing Baldur's Gate. It's crazy that Isabel gets kidnapped. And we're like, oh, that's crazy. He's like, yeah, I couldn't like save anybody in the inn. And we're like, oh, that's crazy. You should be high enough level to do that. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, oh, did you go through the creation? He's like, the what? And I remember being like, can you even do that? Like, he was like, yeah, I'm trying to fight Moonrise right now, but didn't do like the Gauntlet of Shard, didn't do like any of that stuff. And not to put you on blast, but it was so funny because I kept being like, oh, I guess you can play the game in different ways. And that's kind of the appeal, is like, there's technically a way that it's like designed for you to do it, but there are other ways that you can figure out solutions to puzzles. It tends to be more intuitive than a lot of other games that are similar. But it was just funny because I was like, wow, okay, good luck, I guess.
Yeah, was so bad when I started. Okay, so the first character I made was a Dragonborn druid. And I actually don't recommend druids.
Fly high, Silas.
Yeah, my bestie. I actually don't recommend druids as a starting class because I don't know. It was a bit hard to get into, and I was like figuring out how things like spell slots worked, which I'm not familiar with. Because in other games where you have magic, you have like FP, and you just can it like regenerates on its own, or you're able to regenerate it. Anyway, here's some things that I did wrong from the get-go. First of all, I did not realize the extent to which you could just sort of like fuck off and explore, which is something that I really learned to enjoy about this game. But when I first played it, I was like, okay, the quest says I need to go to this location. So I am going to go to that location and not go genuinely anywhere else besides that location. And I was like, guys, this game's like really hard. And Mel and Ollie were like, okay, have you like gone and found this character or like explored over here? And I was like, no. Why the hell would I do that? I don't know what you're talking about.
Have you no whimsy?
Yeah, where's your boyish joy?
There was none, apparently.
It's funny for me because I'm someone who always has to do all of the side quests before I advance a story in a video game, which is like fun, but part of it is like, especially when you get a lot of side quests at once, it's like I'll finish all the side quests and then I like won't have anything to do other than the main plot for like the end of the game. That was a problem that I had a lot with Marvel's Spider-Man was that I did all the side quests first and then it was like, oh my god, wait, the game's like gonna wow, this ending is coming really fast. But anyway, this is not about that game. It was funny for me because this was like perfect for me because I love doing little side quests. I feel like a game can really shine when you see like, oh, one thing I think is like how many resources are devoted to making your side quests, because you can tell there's a lot of games where it's like they only use the set dressing that was already made for the main quest for the side quests. But this game really like it went all out. So it's like, yeah, there were some assets that were reused or some places that you went to multiple times, but it was like there were entire branches of the game that were side quests that had all of their own models and completely unique acting and, you know, completely unique characters. So I think that was really interesting. My first character, I actually made, Mel and I made some fuck-ass little halfling character that we had for like 5 minutes, and then we took his clothes off in combat just to see what would happen, and then we couldn't figure out how to put his clothes back on because we were in combat, and that takes an
forgot about
action.
that entirely.
Yeah, and we also got jump scared by his penis, because I was like, whoa, get that out of here. That's not what I set you as. That's another fun thing about Baldur's Gate 3. You can give anybody any genitals you want and make them any gender with any body and give them any voice. That's fucking awesome. I love that. Wish there was a little more body diversity, but you know,
you're either kind of strong or really strong, and you cannot be fat. It is illegal.
Yeah, but only sometimes you can have tits. Anyway, but so we made that character. That character did not make it off the ship, I don't think.
Okay, now I know who you're talking about.
I had a character that I made that was based off a D&D character that I made when I was like a freshman in college. And I played with her for like 10 hours. And then I was like, I can't figure out how to get into the grove. Like I was stuck. I didn't know that they would open the gate if you just walked up to it. So I had to find like a way around. So I ended up like jumping around. But then I was like in the back and all of the tieflings were hostile to me. And I was like 10 hours into the game, so I had to just restart it. And then I have my beautiful baby boy, who's a tiefling sorcerer. And he's my fucking ride or die. He's my best friend. I'm obsessed with him. But he ate the girls up, and I finished my first playthrough with him.
So for context, I've talked about this a little bit on one RuPalp's pod race. I am not much of a jamer. I'm not one for jaming. I play The Sims. I play funny little app games, but a big old video game. Actually, that's not true. I was dabbling in my gamer era because I had also recently, relatively, played Jedi Fallen Order, but this was my first video game where, like, I didn't have someone, like, holding my hand being like, okay, you're gonna have to do a wall run now. It was just, like, sorry, speaking total tangent, some of the scariest moments in, I think, Ollie and I's relationship were playing Jedi Fallen Order, trying to do, like, the wall running parts. Not because, like, I felt like I was in any danger, but I could tell that there was a tenseness betwixt the two of us that I have not felt since.
Okay.
It was quite dark.
If I may defend myself, it's because I've played that game, I think, like, 2-ish times now, 2 or 3 times. And I think that's a fun game. And wall running was one of those things that, like, once I got it. And it's hard to teach, so I'm trying to help Mel, like, do this. And it's like you would go on the same wall, like, upwards of 15 times and make the same mistake every time. Yes. And I'm trying so hard because I'm a horrible micromanager and I've been working on it. But I'm sitting here being like, okay, I don't want to overstep, but I'm like, okay, maybe try jumping a little earlier. And you're like, okay, and then jump, like, way earlier. And it's like, I felt like I was sitting there trying so hard to not be, like, annoying, but also it was killing me because I could see exactly what you were doing wrong. And I was like, oh my God, just let me do it. And you're like, no, I can do it.
I'm sorry, I was trying to be a gamer.
The way that
that all being said,
the way that I remember that period of time.
I know Yoda said do or do not. There is no try, but, like, you were trying.
Someone's patience. Anyways, what were you going to say, Noah?
Just that I distinctly remember that period of time because I am also a hashtag gamer girl, and, like, that game's mechanics also came easy to me. So I was getting texts from Mel that were like, I can't wall run.
That was a dark time. Anyways, Baldur's Gate 3 was a very intuitive game experience, and especially because I had, like, a background understanding of D&D, figuring out the game dynamics came relatively easy to me. Also, I think in terms of, like, the things that I like in a story, and especially, like, a video game where there is kind of, like, more of an open world setting, I like when you can look and see details that might seem random and just, like, bullshit, but then end up being an important detail down the line. I'm a bit of a hoarder in that way, where I'm like, oh, there's this text, I'm gonna take that. I'm very Gale Decarios coded in that way. Anyways, so yeah, like Ollie said, we had that gentleman whose penis was out, and I can't remember his name for the life of me. And then I played a character who I created. Her name is Tavina Hallowleaf. And she is my best friend. She's the baddest bitch of them all. She is a drow fighter. And one thing I also really liked about playing this game was that you could really do, like, engage in role play. I think of one scene specifically that really, I feel like, is evocative of the character of Tavina. Down in the Underdark, there is a scene where there's some Dwagar who are like, oh yeah, we have some slaves. And in that conversation, in the middle of it, he didn't even finish the sentence, like, talking about how he owned slaves. I was like, I'm gonna kill him. Like, that's the only right option, right? Like, I'm not engaging in this fantasy racism. We'll talk about the fantasy racism in this game, but Tavina Hallowleaf has hands, and she will throw them. And yeah, she's, like, everything to me now. I think about her every day.
I like you spoiled who her romantic interest was.
Yeah.
Because of the last name drop. No, I mean, it's not like it's not actually a spoiler. I'm like, oh my God, you've ruined this episode of RuPalp's Pod Race.
Oh my God, it's over for us.
Spoiler.
No, yeah, I have done 3 complete playthroughs of this game now. 1 incomplete. To the conclusion of Silas's story, what had happened was I skipped over pretty much every major thing you could do in Act 1 because I was like, I'll come back later. Now, I want to be clear. The game tells you on 3 or 4 separate occasions when you are about to do something that will have consequences you can't come back from. And I was like, oh, well, they don't mean that. I was like, leave anyway. Like, okay, things I skipped in my first playthrough of this game. The entire Underdark. Like I went there and I walked around, but I did not do any of the major quests because I straight up like I was just like, it says to talk to this guy. I can't find him though, so I'm just like not gonna look around. I'll come back later. The Githyanki crash I went to, it was too hard because I was under level, and then I left and I was like, I'll come back to that. Now, mind you, if you go to enter the Shadowlands, which is where Act 2 properly starts, and you have not completed the crash, Lae'zel will try to leave your party. Like, she'll straight up be like, I'm gonna go. And I was like, she doesn't mean that. And I like persuaded her out of it and just kept on chugging and did not respond. And then I was in the fucking Shadowlands, and this is my ultimate failure in this game. Isabel, who's a cleric of Soluna, is like, LOL, I'm protecting this inn. It's totally fine. Don't worry about it. This guy shows up and is like, I'm going to kidnap her. If she is kidnapped, the protection around this inn falls, and you do have to murder every single character in it, with the exception of Jaheira, who will join your party at a significantly earlier portion of the game than she is supposed to. On top of that, the only character who can fix Karlach's engine is dead. I also learned this later. Is that on my second playthrough, which I did finish, and actually I had a really good time doing. My human sorcerer Eric, I love you. I miss you every day. However, you're supposed to fix her engine in Act 1, and then do it again in Act 2. I didn't know that because I straight up just did not walk around the Grove the first time that I played the game. I was like, LOL, I don't know what's over there anyway. And then finally, I got Silas to Moonrise Towers to do the fight, and I could not survive any of them, even on story mode, because I think I was level 4 doing,
oh my god,
doing Moonrise. Yeah. And then I gave up, and I started over on a new character who I explored everything, like every square mile of that map. I was like, I'm going to find genuinely anything I can. And then I was fine. But yeah, that was my first playthrough experience. Silas, my Dragonborn, I'm so sorry I did that to you. It's not your fault.
Poor beautiful baby boy. That's so sad. I'm so sorry that happened to you. I guess that does kind of beg the next question. So who is everyone's like main character? Like, what's does everyone feel like the character that they started, like that they really went through with in earnest? Like, how was your experience with that? Because like I said, I know I have my little guy who is a tiefling sorcerer. I named him Tavris because I was like, surely no one's going to name their character anything that has Tav in it. Anyway, but I named him that. He's so slay. He is, I kind of came up with like a little backstory for him in the way that he was like, he's a sorcerer, right? Which means that he has like sort of natural access to magic. But he was like, oh my gosh, I found out I'm a sorcerer at a young age. He was like, I'm going to go to college for magic. So he goes to college and is like in class with all these wizards, right? Because, you know, wizards are the ones who are more learned, who study. And then he goes, like, he finishes school and he goes to apply for jobs. And they're like, oh, but it says here you're not actually a wizard. And he's like, yeah, but I have all the knowledge of a wizard. And they're like, right, okay, well, we're really looking for a wizard for this position. So he keeps not getting jobs. So he does work at, like, a fantasy coffee shop in Baldur's Gate. And he was getting groceries when he got taken by the ship. Like, that was kind of my thought for him. And then I think he does come back in Act 3 and goes into the shop, and they're like, oh my god, we thought like you either died or no call, no showed. And he's like, well, I guess I don't really need this job anymore. And they're like, oh, well, can you cover something on Saturday? And he's like, no, I have a worm. I have a tadpole. I have to take care of that. Sorry. But yeah, I really enjoyed playing as a sorcerer. Again, I feel like the magic classes are kind of like not hard, but it's because like I've played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, so I was like, okay, I got it down pat. I know what all these spells do. I understand how it works. So it is interesting to hear, like, Noah, you'd mentioned like it's hard to play as a druid to start with, but yeah, how do you guys feel like your actual like first playthroughs went with your classes and your characters, etc.?
That is a good question. Well, first of all, I think as someone who's honestly, in my playing of D&D prior to this, I did a lot of DMing, so getting to be a character and like make choices was very exciting for me. That being said, my hashtag sense of justice really propelled this character, who, I don't know, in D&D in general, I'm afraid of playing magical characters, mostly because spell slots confuse me. So I decided to play a fighter because I was like, I can hit things real good. And so I enjoyed that. I enjoyed getting to play a little bit of a meathead. And specifically, like, I don't know, a meathead with a sense of justice was fun. Playing the game, there was like weirdly character development, I feel like happened, and not just like from the party members, which obviously we'll get into, like the party members and their character development, but because of the choices that this game makes you make, you do see, like, there are certain characters who it's like, oh, like they become a little power hungry, etc. And I don't know, I enjoyed that you can create a character, have kind of like this like lore for them, and it can also seemingly fit into the game, and you can have like a satisfying arc with that character that you create.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. The character that I like did my first real playthrough with was Eric, who is a human sorcerer. I actually really liked playing as magic classes, especially once I figured out what the hell was going on with like the controls, because there were a couple of those like early fights where I was like, I only did one thing, like why don't I get to do another thing? And it's like, okay, sit down for a moment. The funniest thing about that playthrough was, one, I really enjoyed playing as a sorcerer, and like the spells you get are pretty fun to use, and I felt like I got to make like Mel was saying, like distinctive character choices. Like Eric also had a pretty like strong moral compass, and so whenever anyone's like, do you want to do something a little evil, he'd be like, no, I don't believe in that. However, subsequent characters, one of them that I made who was a warlock had this like thirst for knowledge that I wanted to play into. So anytime that someone was like, do you want to push that guy off a cliff and see what happens? He'd be like, absolutely, I do. And I would like do something shady because he was like, I don't know, let's find out. But one thing I did on that playthrough was whenever there was a decision or a conversation that I wasn't sure about, I would save in the middle of the conversation, make a decision, see how it played out, and then reload and do it differently. Also, if ever there was like, roll for persuasion or something and I didn't get it, I would reload and I would do it again.
Speaking of which, and Ollie, you might want to speak to this, Ollie and I's first playthroughs, because, you know, we live together, we're playing on the same computer, just in different saves, and so, like, Ollie would go to work and I would play, and vice versa, and we'd, like, compare notes of what was happening in our stories, and Ollie would be like, oh, well, you know, Tavros was able to do this, this, and that because he has a high charisma score. And I was like, I had to like kill 5 people for that same exact information. What the what are you talking about?
Yeah, Tavros did have, by the end of the game, he had plus 11 to persuasion. So, and I think starting out he had plus 5 because he had a high score in it and then also had proficiency in it. So it was, playing that game with high persuasion is basically like playing on easy mode. Like, you can do so much shit by just being like, please, can I come through this way? Can we be friends, please? And they're like, oh my god, you are so charming, young man. Absolutely. Come on in.
So I actually was going to talk about this a little later, but this is because it's come up in conversation. But in 2 of my playthroughs, I did make the decision to become half a Lithid, and one of the perks of that is that your persuasion shoots through the roof. So if you're playing as a half a Lithid character and you already had decent persuasion, you're effectively playing Act 3 on easy mode. Like, I don't think that there was a single persuasion check that I failed, and all of them would be like above 20. Like, it would be like, you need to get 15 or above, and it'd be like 36 would be like what I ended up with.
I was in the fucking trenches. I was fighting for my fucking life turn after turn. That being said, if I needed to throw something, if I needed to jump very good, I was flying into heaven. That game was so fucking hard.
I honestly really came to love those mechanics of like it felt like your character's choices and like what their stats were actually did matter to the gameplay. I thought that was really fun. On my last run, I did a tiefling druid who is the first and only so far Dark Urge run that I've done, and he has -2 intelligence, and so like every insight check was basically a given failure, to the point where in certain situations I would bring characters that had higher intelligence and like just walk them around the environment to be like, can you guys get this please? Or like, I think also his perception was low, so in any event where you had to like find a secret lever or a hidden switch, he was like, I don't know, man. It's a mystery to me. Who's to say?
No, that's literally me bringing Gale around to everything, so I could just be like, sir, can you tell me what's going on with this? Okay, I can send you back to camp now. I don't need you anymore. So speaking of other characters, who did everyone romance? Noah and I have a funny story, because both of us played as a male sorcerer, and both of us romanced the same little guy, which is funny, because I feel like, looking at me, you wouldn't guess that he is my type, and he's not really my personal type, but because he's so much the type of my character that I played as, I'm like, I've become invested, and now I'm like, that's my fucking husband. If anyone says shit about him, I'll kill them. And that's one Wyll Ravengard.
Yeah, my first romance was also Wyll Ravengard, and I love that gentleman. I think he's very like overly chivalrous, which I actually found charming for most of the game. I know some people ostensibly found it annoying. I was like, no, he's nice. His romance is really fun. I do think it's funny because if you romance him as a tiefling, if you choose to spare Karlach, which there are some red flags of people who play this game. It's like people who get to the end of the game and they're like, well, Wyll got this cool what do you mean Wyll gets horns? What do you mean Shadowheart dyes her hair? I didn't know that.
No, that's like when you see like a cool clip online and you're like, oh, this person had their like this cool moment in Act 3. Why does Shadowheart have dark hair?
Yeah.
Hey, wait a minute, guys.
Hang on a minute. But if you're a tiefling and Wyll gets horns, you can be like, I actually like them because you look more like me. Teehee. Like, I like that romance. Yeah. Wyll, I'm so sorry for what they did to you by giving you, I think, by far the least content of any of the companion characters.
Yeah, I think he has like 2 hours less of dialogue than the next closest person, who is Karlach, who was added after early access. And like, I know the reason is because like they did end up reworking a bunch of Wyll's character due to poor reception, which I'm like already have questions about. But I think Wyll has like 8 hours and 40 minutes of dialogue or something like that, and Astarion, sorry. I call him
Terr.
Yeah. Mel and I call him Terr. Like short for like a Terrian. Like we just call him Terr. And it's really hard. I was thinking to myself before we recorded this, I was like, I have to remember to call him by his full name, but I am just going to call him Terr.
My name in this chat is Put It in Reverse Terr.
If you guys haven't seen that video, look up Put It in Reverse Terr. It's so funny.
It's so fucked.
It's so fucked up. But anyway, but Astarion has like 14 and a half hours of dialogue. And, like, I'm not saying that you can't have a favorite. Like, I'm not saying that the developers can't have a favorite, but, like, little weird that your only major black character in the game has so little dialogue, and every single time he's in any sort of promo material, this horrible woman is with him. The amount of people who are like, but Mazora's sexy, why wouldn't Wyll want to be controlled by a sexy woman? Hey guys, let's evaluate. Let's think. First of all, maybe because
Taylor Swift looking devil.
Maybe because of how she behaves and acts towards him, And I really don't like people just ignoring the fact that she is constantly calling, you know, a black man a dog and a pet. I'm like, hey guys, we realize that this is not right. Like, Mizora is bad. Like, no, that's like, I was like, I can't even have fun with, like, I'm fun with people who are like, oh my god, I love Mizora. I'm like, I hate that bitch. I hate her so much. I'm like, I would dog walk you.
I like whenever, because she shows up in camp and there's no consequence if you just keep throwing random shit at her. Before I long rested every night while she was in camp, I would like cast lightning bolt on her or like throw fire at her. I would be like, please, you have to leave. And then one night, this is interesting actually, in my first playthrough as Eric, as the human sorcerer, this never happened. In all subsequent playthroughs that I've done, Mizora has tried to hit it. And I am always like, no, I think the fuck not. But I was so taken aback when that happened because I didn't know that she was going to do that. And she was like, we should like fuck tonight. And I was like, we should what? Hello? Like, just, oh my god, just disturbing. Yeah, I romanced Wyll. And then after I romanced Wyll, I romanced Gale. And then my most recent one, I romanced Shadowheart. I'm gonna say something perhaps controversial. I think the Shadowheart romance is one of the best romances in the game, especially if you choose to have her walk away from Shar like as I don't know. I think she's a wonderful character. I'm obsessed with her.
Yeah, Shadowheart. That she was my wife. When I started playing this game, I was like, okay, first of all, I've heard, rumor has it, that you can have sex in this game. That's crazy. I'm just gonna speedrun who's gonna try to hit. And immediately Lae'zel was like, hey. And so I was like, okay, sure, whatever, cool. And then I was like, oh wait, she's got a look in her eye that's concerning me. And a scent kink that's crazy. So I was like, okay, you're a little bonkers, love. I don't know if I'm gonna be doing that. And then I fell into the arms of Shart. And her character arc in this story, honestly, basically every single character has like this like such a fascinating way of where they begin at the story and then at the end, where depending on your choices they end up. And I agree completely. The Shart I don't want to say like I guess the deprogramming of one, what is her name? Genevieve Hallaleaf? What is her name?
Genevieve. Girl,
I'm happy that you go by Shadowheart now, because Genevieve is a goofy-ass name.
Damn. No,
It's true.
I am just saying, another fun thing, I have not romanced any women in this game, which is really weird for me to say, because I'm like, my plan was to play an origin, and the origin is like when you choose to play as one of the characters that already exists. I started a Shadowheart origin where I was like, I'm gonna romance Lae'zel, because I think the two of them together, I think they have, the girls aren't doing toxic Yuri like that anymore. So I think Shadowheart and Lae'zel, I have my own little shipping brain when I look at these characters. This is something I always got into in the Dragon Age fandom. I mean, I didn't really get into it. I wasn't really participating. I was mostly just liking and reblogging posts because, you know. But for those of you who don't know, I was really into Dragon Age. I still am. But I don't think Dreadwolf exists. Like, I'm really not going to believe that game exists until I am finished with it. But that's not the point. I was like, I was like, I think that Lae'zel and Shadowheart together, there's something there. There's some sauce there of both of them being deprogrammed from a goddess that was their whole life, only to find out that they were being manipulated the whole time and being taken advantage of. Like, there's something so good there of them both deprogramming that together. But then I started to play, and Shadowheart has -2 charisma. And I just couldn't do it. So I never finished. Noah is like choking on a drink.
Wow. Okay. I admit I actually interpreted that sentence incorrectly. I thought you were saying like I started to romance Shadowheart, but her -2 charisma made her impossible to be around.
No, I was trying to play as her, but it's like every time you'd have to try to do persuasion, I'd be like, well, the answer is no.
Well, it's over. Yeah. I never did an origin run, or at least I haven't yet. I do think that the premise is extremely funny. Speaking of of like origin characters and whatnot, when I did my first run, did not know where to find half of the companions, so I just like didn't grab them for like an hour into the game, and then they were like, have you gotten Gale yet? And I was like, where is he? Because also I should note, one thing about Gale of Waterdeep is I actually knew about him before I knew anything else about Baldur's Gate 3 as a game, because when we were on a camping trip a couple months ago, our friend was playing Baldur's Gate and they were romancing Gale, and I was like, what's this guy's deal? And everyone was just like, oh wait, sorry, right.
No.
She was not romancing Gale. That was before Gale got
But she seems like someone who should have romanced Gale.
Shout out Julia.
Yeah.
Mr. Queen.
But anyway, I was like, what's Gale of Waterdeep's deal? And everyone was like, oh, he has to eat magic artifacts or this orb in his chest explodes. And I was like, oh, okay, but like that's all like hyperbole, right? Like they didn't like mean it in those exact terms. And then I played the game and Gale's like, I have to eat magic artifacts or this orb in my chest will explode. And also there's like, if you're walking around with him in the early part of the game, he'll occasionally just like double over and be like, please, I have to eat that pair of boots. And you're like, okay.
He's kind of like, you know that meme where it's that flower and it's like, I'm gonna die of dehydration, you have to piss on me, and it's like a comic and the other stick figure's like, I'm not gonna do that, and then there's another stick figure who's like, and you're just gonna let him die? That's how I feel like some people are when they're like, ugh, Gale needs all these magic items. He needs 3. Let's calm down, guys. It's not that big a deal.
He needs 3, and it's like, did you really need a circlet that makes it so that you don't take lightning damage if it's a full moon? Like, surely you can part with that. Yeah, Gale is funny. Astarion is funny because I knew that he was a vampire before I played the game, and the incredibly obvious and heavy-handed foreshadowing of that is, in my opinion, extremely funny. Like, if you're walking along the road, you can find this boar, and you're like, huh, it's missing all of its blood. I wonder if this pale, red-eyed stranger has any thoughts about that. And he's like, no, beats me.
Who has visible sharp teeth.
Yeah, he's like, boars.
And holes in his neck.
Yeah, I also love...
Do you think he just doesn't know? Do you think he just doesn't know those are there? Like, it's not like he can look in a mirror. Like, do you think he has no idea that it's
fucked.
so... Do you think it's so... Like, he has no idea it's so obvious that he's a vampire?
I saw this incredible comic, and I don't remember who made it, I'm so sorry, but it was like, because Astarion can't use mirrors, he has the other companions in camp try to draw him, and like, that's how he like sees himself.
Oh, I saw that in art, and it was like all of them did these mediocre stick figures, and then Lae'zel's drawing was like really good. And they're like, what? And she's like, because I am a warrior, and I am good at everything. Fuck you guys.
I've never failed. I also love when if you turn Lae'zel down sexually, she literally is like, you're lost, and like walks away.
Lae'zel is that girl.
Something I love about the party of Baldur's Gate 3, you know, the playable characters, but they're like not your main character necessarily. The companions, thank you, is that they have the vibe of a polycule. And I mean that in the most affectionate way. It's like, okay, y'all are up to some shit. And of course, Gale has that haircut because he's in a polycule. That it makes sense. It's all the pieces are all coming together.
Wow.
No, but like it really does track. Gale of Waterdeep, you are so pathetic, girl. I love you occasionally.
He does look like the only man in a like there's like a polycule and he's like the one man in it. And it's like at first you think that there's one man and then you find out there's like 7 members. Gale, and like he's just one of them, and you think at first he's like a key member, but then it turns out he's actually just kind of there.
Gale of Waterdeep is the kind of guy where he'd be like, actually I'm polyamorous, and you'd be like, that wasn't a reveal. Like we all sort of
except for here's the thing. I feel like it's kind of more of a reveal that he's strictly monogamous. Like, the reveal when it's like, oh my god, Halsin wants to party with us. He's like, I can't do that. I don't know if I'd be able to do. Not to make a joke about if you're monogamous. I mean, I think I am too, probably. But it's like, you know, it's just funny. I'm like, I love. So this is another thing I love is that you do get the option that if Halsin's in your party, the chances are he's gonna want to fuck you bad style. Like, if you show him human decency. I just love that it's like you can engage in polyamorous behaviors with him. And I think, like, this game probably could have dealt with polyamory with a little bit more grace. But I do think it's interesting that, like, the reaction of some of the companions and, like if you're romancing them, because it's like, technically you can romance Halsin and Karlach. But when you ask Karlach, she's like, well, I really, like, don't want you to, but if that's what's going to make you happy, then okay. So it's not like an exact, like, no, you can't do this. But it is, like, it's an interesting thing where it's like, oh, just because it's not game breaking or just because you can do it doesn't mean that it's the, you know, polite thing to do, or doesn't mean that it's the most considerate thing to do. And I think that's interesting because that's a line that a lot of games don't necessarily toe a lot of the time.
Yeah, the relationship dynamics are actually, like, really interesting between all the characters. I will say it's extremely funny if you're romancing Shadowheart, because if you go up to her and you're like, Halsin wants to fuck nasty style, she's like, bitch, go for it. I want to know everything about that man. Like, and if I can join in, I'll be there. Like, I think she literally is like, if I had the opportunity to climb Mount Halsin, I wouldn't want to be stopped either. I was like, okay, no. Shit.
There's a scene, like, so there's a scene where there's these drow twins and you can sleep with one or both of them, which is kind of gross because they're siblings. But, you know, Karlach's the only one who's like, wait a minute, guys. But if you sleep with them, you can sleep with them with your romance partner, but you can also sleep with them and your romance partner and Halsin. And if you sleep with Shadowheart and Halsin, Shadowheart and Halsin are basically just, like, sleeping with each other and everyone else is kind of there. Like, they're like, Halsin's like, Shadowheart, I want you so bad, my princess. And she's like, oh, Halsin, you're so large, or whatever the fuck she says. Anyway, I'm really good at impressions. You want to hear anyone else?
Could you do Terr?
It's me, Terr. It's me, Astarion, darling. I've pooped and peed my pants. Oh no.
Is it okay if we talk a little bit about the other companions that you get on this quest, in this game that aren't necessarily, like, romanceable?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I do feel the need. Jaheira, no, because people on Twitter might talk about how they want to fuck Raphael or whatever. I went on my hands and knees. Why can't we romance Jaheira? Why can't we become the beautiful step-parent of 18 million beautiful adopted children? What the fuck is wrong with you, Larian?
They need another they need another absent parent in their life, and that could be me. No, I just think also Tracy Wilkes, who voices Jaheira, has talked about how she's like, yeah, it was something, like, really interesting that it's like, you know, just because, like, she's had this husband, like, she's felt love, like, does not mean that her life is over now that he's gone. Like she kind of made a compelling point for, like, why you should have been able to romance her, but was also like, yeah, with time constraints and, like, with how much more that would need to add to the game, like, it would be a lot. Also, her and Minthara's voice actress doing, like, playful banter about shipping their characters. I'm like, now hang on. Now wait a minute. They are toxic Yuri. Hang on. I'm fucking sad. I love women. That's my problem is I'm like, I feel like I want my character to romance these other characters, but I'm like, I want them to all fuck each other. Honestly, have fulfilling, beautiful relationships with each other. You know, that's what I want. I'm sitting here, like I said, I'm like, Shart and Lae'zel need to get it on. But I'm also like, I think about this often. I'm also like, I know it's like such a basic ass thing, But Wyll and Karlach together, there's some sauce there. They're also T for
Yeah.
T, and you can't fight me. You can't fight me on that. I'm sorry.
No,
That's canon.
That's real.
To me.
My hot take about like within the companions is I do think it makes the most sense if Gale is one of the only characters who ends up single, because I'm just like, that man needs to not be in a relationship for a while. He's got some shit to figure out.
Yeah. Listen, Bloodweave Nation, I respect you all. Those two definitely need to, like, just get some help before they enter a relationship of honestly any kind.
I feel that this is actually sort of because one of the things that I wanted to talk about this episode was like some of the major character choices that you can make, because each of the main companions has like a story arcing quest that you can do, I think, in pretty vastly different ways, with the exception of Wyll, who has decided over the course of a single conversation twice. Okay.
Yeah. Wyll, which is also funny about Wyll, because like I feel like every character has a moment where you're like, you do what you think is right, and Will's the only one who it's like you basically just tell him should he break his contract or should he save his father. Like it's like, oh wow, that's awesome that I will just decide for him. Cool.
Also, at the end of his arc, before the game's conclusion, he's like, I think that I want to be like Duke Ravengard now. Like I want to like get into politics and like do my thing. You can just straight up tell him like, I don't know if you should do that. And he's like, you're right. I shouldn't do that. What am I talking about? I'm going to do this completely other thing that I've never mentioned once before in the entire course of the game. And then he just does. And then also, as a fun side bonus, when you talk to his father, which you have to for the end of that quest, you repeat this conversation again. So if you didn't like your choice the first time, you have an opportunity to do it twice.
Yeah. Also, the fact that there is no option to be like, fuck you, older Ravengard. Like, I know it looked like your child. Like, I know that it's kind of complicated because obviously Wyll couldn't say, like, here's what happened. Like, he sees that and is like, oh my god, my son made a pact with the devil. Like, what the fuck am I supposed to do? But I'm also like, fuck you for seeing this 17-year-old who's clearly struggling and being like, get out the city. Fuck you. But it's like, the thing with Will's story that really gets me is so much of it is like, the good ending is where he like makes it all up with his dad and never is like confronts the fact that it's like everything that happened to him was so terrible. And in the good ending, it's like, oh, Mizora's here. She's just like a fun character who hangs out. It's like, how come there's no reckoning with that? It's kind of like how I'm also like, I feel like I have this problem with Gale's ending too, where it's like part of his ending is like the good ending is him being like, I'm gonna make it right with, you know, I'm not gonna get back with Mystra, but like I'm gonna make it right by her and give her this. And like so much of his story is being like, oh, Mystra, what Mystra did, like I broke her trust. I'm like, she groomed you, dog. Like, can we have, I wish there was an option to just be like,
Mystra, when I catch
hey.
you, Mystra, when I catch you, it's over. I'm coming for your ass.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other, I mean, a couple of the big character choices. One of them is the conclusion of Astarion's story is you go to his vampire master's weird castle house, and Cazador, who I'm kind of obsessed with because he is a shitty person, but he's kind of prancing around like a pony on amphetamines. Like the way that he talks and does shit is like just like insane. He's also, I love the
trying to do the rite of ascension whilst hopped up on quaaludes.
Well, like just like the way that he talks is so off the charts. I love that performance. He's like, you really believed you could stop me? Like, is it that serious? Anyway, you pull up to his weird palace and you have to open this fucked up door. You have to fight a little skeleton guy or just be like, don't be mean. And the skeleton guy's like, okay, whatever, and leaves. And then basically, because you find out that Astarion is one of 7,000 other vampire spawn who's supposed to do this big ritual, and they're all going to pop like balloons, and they're going to make Cazador into this like really powerful vampire god thing. And basically for the whole game prior to this, Astarion's like, I don't know, we could always do this ritual ourselves. Could be interesting. And then you're like, maybe don't do that. However, a lot of people, which is kind of alarming to me, can't lie. I'm sorry to the Ascended Astarion fans, but like, I'm perplexed by that choice. A lot of people are like, we should do the ritual and murder 6,999 people so that Astarion can get like worse as a person.
It's so...
Well, no, you don't understand. It's because he's sexy when he does that.
But like, like, is he?
I think it's... I want to make a distinction.
Was he sexy before?
First of all, he kind of... He's kind of giving that Tumblr gif of the guy there, because they remember when Larian added that new kiss animation for Ascended Asterion where he looks at the person and like pushes them down and then points at the ground, and it's so funny. But he looks like that gif of that guy from Tumblr, but it's so funny. I think the thing that gets me though, because like I want to say before we go any further that Larian has made it pretty abundantly clear like what the good endings are for each character. But the other thing too is like I am not saying like, oh, no one should do these endings, because I think it's like they're in the game for a reason and they are interesting endings depending on how you want to play and how you want to interpret the characters and how you like what is interesting. And I think that this is something we can have a bigger conversation about vis-a-vis. I know people throw the term media literacy around a lot, but there's a really big difference between condoning something and showing and like representing something. So it's like, in this game, you can have Gale become a god. That's not really his best ending, but it doesn't mean that it's like you're not a bad person for deciding to do that. But it's clearly not like saying like, oh, this is the good ending for him. It's not condoning that, but it is like representing it because it's an interesting storytelling device. It's an interesting plot point, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's like because you can do it, it's the right thing. Which is, I think, kind of like, again, with Asterion, it's like, oh, you can make him become basically, like, the whole point is, if you do Ascended Asterion, like, if he ascends, he basically becomes Cazador. Like, he becomes Cazador 2.0 and re-perpetuates this cycle, and then builds up his own army of spawn, like, so it's like, just because you can do that, it's a really cool story point, and there's nothing wrong with playing that. But we have to be able to be mindful enough to be like, this is maybe not, just because you can do it does not mean that it's like the good ending for him or the good ending for your character to be on equal footing in the romance. Like, it's just grossly misinterpreted.
Yeah, no, I agree that, you don't have to play as a good guy. Like, that is another asset of the game. Like, you can't, or another aspect of the game. You can be evil. Like, that's not a bad thing. And like, I think my problem with a lot of the discourse I have seen around the Ascended Asterion route is that people act as though like, I don't know, like you said, like that's a good thing for him, that like he's like getting revenge on his abuser, and it's like, revenge is a strong word. And I think that there's a lot of things in conversation about like transformative justice where like, yeah, you can't, wanting to kill your abuser, that's not a bad, like you are allowed to feel that, and like sometimes frankly maybe you should. But also like, I don't know, I feel like there's some like co-opting of that idea to just justify like, I like when this character acts fucked up and evil.
Well, because it's also like, this is just real quick, the other thing too is it's like, especially with Cazador and Asterion, it's like he definitely does still kill Cazador even if you don't ascend him. Like, Cazador's getting his just desserts one way or another. So you can't pretend that letting Asterion ascend, you can't pretend
Terr.
that letting him ascend is like, that's the only way he can get justice. Like, no, he gets justice in the other ending too. It's not like this is the end all be all.
I will say one of the funniest things about Ascended Astarion as like a character, because like, listen, if you're into being dominated by twinks, who am I to begrudge you that? Live your truth. Me personally, if that gentleman was like, on your knees, darling, I would just say no. I would like walk away like, what are you gonna do? You weigh 102 pounds sopping wet. Like, okay, get into it. I don't know. I think that Astarion is very funny. And speaking of being evil, so I did a full Dark Urge playthrough. I think I'm the only one here who actually did it like from start to finish. That's not shade. I'm just saying. But the Dark Urge playthrough is actually, I really did enjoy it from a story perspective. It's very different. The thing is, so what you're playing as is the Dark Urge is you're playing as a Baal spawn. So Baal is the god of murder, which is just excessively dumb. And what I mean by dumb is like Baal is like like an edgy 13-year-old, like in his personality, and so are all of his worshippers. But in game, everyone is kind of like over him. They're like, oh my god, he is so stupid. Why will he not shut up? Anyway, you wake up with no memory of your past self besides like this vague, nefarious urge to maim people. One of the funniest things about that is that when you go to get Gale, who's stuck in a portal, you can bite his hand off as the Dark Urge. You can like chomp it off with your mouth. Which is kind of crazy if you think about it. However,
did you do that?
No, I didn't.
Did
I
you
didn't
do
do
that?
I did not.
Because
No.
I think if you do that, you also just don't get Gale. Like, that's the last you see of him.
Yeah, no, you bite his hand off and he goes back into the portal and we just never see or hear from him again. My Dark Urge run, I did where possible. I resisted the Dark Urge. There is one choice in the Dark Urge run that you do not have an option over, and that is there's this bard named Alfira who you meet in the Emerald Grove. And when you go to the Underdark and you go to camp, Alfira shows up, regardless of if you talk to her in the Grove or not, by the way, because I knew that I didn't know what happened with her, but I knew that something did, and I was like, maybe if I just like ignore her completely while I'm in the Grove and pretend she doesn't exist, she'll be totally fine. She comes and finds you anyway, and when you go to do a long rest, you do like straight up murder and dismember her, and then wake up and be like, she has been murdered. It is at this point the game gives you the option to hide her body and then wash your hands and go back to bed, which is exactly what I did.
Please.
I think there's also an option where you can be like, oh, well, if Starion's a vampire, it was probably him.
You can blame like multiple. I believe you can blame Lae'zel and you can blame Terr and be like, I don't know, guys. I mean, Lae'zel just tried to murder someone like a couple nights ago. Her rampage, it can't be stopped. But
see, if I was there, I'd be like, guys, Gale's looking a little shady. He definitely seems like the type to engage in brutal, I almost said brutal pipe murder. Elias Bouchard, get out of here.
Elias, be gone.
Be gone, thought. Anyway.
Yeah, so you dismember Alfira, which is dramatic and like scary and sucks, but you don't have much of a say in it. The funniest part about that is that as soon as that happens, one of my favorite characters in this game shows up. He's so stupid. His name is Scleritus Fell, which I think is an incredible name for a character, and he is your daddy-designated evil butler. And he's like... He has this like insane British accent and a top hat, and he shows up and is like, I loved that murder you just did. Your father sends this cloak as thanks. And you could be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Who is my father? What's going on? And Scleritus Fell is like, you are so funny. OMG. Anyway, be seeing you, and just like turns into a puddle of blood and vanishes. The thing about the Dark Urge playthrough is every time that the Dark Urge is like, maybe you want to murder someone, you can just be like, no, I don't. And if you're romancing a character, at one point when you go to long rest, the game will try to make you murder them, which is awesome. And you can resist the urge, and then basically you sit up all night making horrible noises and being like, I'm gonna kill you, like you're possessed, and the person you're romancing is like, it's not you, this isn't who you are. They like sit across from you and they're like, please don't murder me. It's such an insane playthrough. Like it comes to a conclusion when you enter Act 3, because by the way, Orin, who is one of the three, I would say main antagonists of the game, basically is your sister, and you are canonically better at being a murder child than she is, and she hates you for it. You pull up to the Temple of Baal, and you're like, "Hi, Orin, you stupid loser. I hate you. And I don't want to be Baal's kid anymore anyway." And she's like, "We have to fight to the death." And that fight is actually really hard because Orin can hit you, I think, like 4 or 5 times in one round for a ton of damage. And I was playing as a druid, and I was like, okay, well, if she can shapeshift, I'm going to do that too. And so I wild shaped into an owlbear, and I beat her ass as an owlbear. However, if you win that fight, you die, and Withers shows up to resurrect you because Baal basically is like, "You defied me, kill yourself," and he hits you with the death beam, and then you die, and Withers has to revive you. What I discovered is, if you finish the fight in wild shape, the cutscene that plays is still you in wild shape, but an owlbear is so physically large that the camera can't compensate, so you're basically staring at the inside of an owlbear's head for the duration of this like really dramatic character moment. And Withers is like, "Oh, thou art reborn," and it's just like a giant owlbear, but like you're inside like the rigging of the owlbear. And so I did this fight 4 or 5 times until finally I was fast enough to dismiss wild shape before the cutscene started. And then I was like, "Okay, Wig, let's proceed."
Oh, Dark Urge. Okay, speaking of Dark Urge, though, and speaking of Orin, let's talk about the villains of this game. Because there's some crazy guys in this game.
Who's everyone's favorite?
Ooh. I mean, I feel like it's a cop-out. It's a cop-out to say Auntie Ethel, right?
Yeah. I was going to say that I feel like the cop-out is almost like Raphael.
See,
because I
gay
feel like
people have 2 moods. Auntie Ethel and Raphael.
True.
I'm just going to say it. I don't know why Auntie Ethel is a villain. What did she really ultimately do wrong? Okay, she helps her community. She takes requests and commissions. It is true that at one point she did eat a kid, but in her defense, she just wanted to be a mother. And should we really begrudge her that?
Yeah, I mean, I will say, as a queer person with the intention of one day becoming a parent, it is really hard to, like, make a baby. So I do get her on that front. Like, I get what where she's coming from. I mean, yeah.
Remind me to never let you near a baby that you can eat.
Listen, I didn't say I was gonna do it. I just said I get where she's coming from.
Ollie, hag pregnancy imminent.
Oh my god, yes, that's my dream. No, I think there's one scene. It's so funny when you're talking to Auntie Ethel for the first time, and you go in and see Mayrina. I had Gale with me, and I don't know what it was about Gale, but he was always talking. Like, anytime there was a chance for a companion to talk, he would take it. He talked so fucking much in my first playthrough. I was like, God damn, shut up. I love Gale. Don't get it twisted. But he was like, Auntie Ethel's like, "Oh, Mayrina's fine. You just need to, like, leave." And Gale's like, she's, like, torturing that woman who's pregnant. Like, we gotta do something about that, right? And I'm like, yeah, unfortunately that is wrong. She's so cunt, though. She's so stannable.
She really is. This is like a quick sidebar, but about Gale talking his ass off, but I can't remember what scene this is in, but in my run when I was romancing him, I think it's in Act 2, you finish this fight and he's like, "It's hard not to get a little worked up after one of these. You're like, your muscles are all sweaty." And I was like, hello? We are in front of all of our friends. Ketherick Thorm is right there. What are you talking about?
So true. Not in front of the Night Song.
Please. Speaking of which, horniest character in the game, Dame Aylin. I'm just saying.
And I respect her for that.
she's like, thank you. I mean, I get it. If Isabel was your girl, like, I get it.
Yeah, no, I'm not begrudging her. I'm just saying she is unabashedly horny, and I respect that.
She went to horny prison. That's what the Gauntlet of Char is.
Literally, she literally went to horny jail. Anyways, point is, a funny story about Auntie Ethel. I have a couple of playthroughs that I'm currently working through. One being the Dark Ferb, my Dark Urge playthrough. And then another one, I am playing a drow bard/wizard. If it was illegal to play a drow in this game, lock me up, boys. But in the Ethel fight, I didn't mean to, but I did Thunder Wave, and so she did fall down a hole, and I didn't get, like, the end of that fight, like the end conversation where she's like, take part of my scalp and eat it and get a little power up or whatever. So I was like, oh, I was really hoping for that. I've kind of been on a struggle bus. Right. So I'm very excited to see what it's going to be like going into Act 3 and meeting back up with her to be like, what's tea? What's happening? How were the gutters?
I was gagged when she showed back up in Act 3. Speaking of other villains, you brought up Raphael. Girl, what a fucking loser. Like, he's like, things about Raphael. He practices his stupid evil speeches. He only wants to get fucked by someone who is literally him.
Also,
like,
he's canonically terrible in bed.
Yeah. He bought Gortash. Like, what is going on? Me and the child, I definitely don't regret impulse buying. There is a piece of art that was a picture of Raphael and young Gortash, and that was the caption, and I think about it all the time. I wish I knew who the artist was, but it's so good.
I just, Raphael is really funny. I'm trying to think of, like, who my favorite...
Sings his own villain song.
Yeah, that was hilarious.
Like, can we all talk about our experiences? Because I did not know that song was coming. And then, like, I'm sitting here living my life. I'm about to do this fight. That fight that took me 1,000,000 hours because I'm stupid and didn't realize how easy it could have been. So I didn't destroy any of those freaking things he was getting his powers from. So it took me like 1,000,000 years. But I was like, and first of all, I was like, whoa, most of the songs, like, don't have, like the fight songs don't usually have lyrics like this. And then he's like, hell has its laws. I'm like, whoa. And the other thing I like the idea of this is that the music is diegetic. So it's like he is performing that live as you're fighting.
You joke about that, but, like, that is happening. If you knock out Kurilla, her vocals stop in the song.
Really?
Yes.
That's fucking crazy.
Yeah. No,
that's awesome.
That sequence that whole mission is really fun, actually. I didn't have a huge problem with that fight. The first time I did it, I didn't have a problem fighting Raphael, but I did just straight up murder Harleep. And, like, I think that is the most appropriate option. However, if you sleep with him successfully, because you can fail at that and die, but if you sleep with him successfully, when you encounter Raphael while you're leaving, you can be like, Harleep says you're terrible at sex, and he's like, enough! And he, like, starts the fight immediately, and he's like, I want to kill this bitch so bad. I did that. I also, the thing about that fight that was so funny is, because you're controlling Hope, who is a cleric, I think is her class, and she has this, like, I think it's called Divine Intervention, because basically it's like 4 things you can only do once in the whole game. One of them is to long rest all of your characters. So I was in the middle of the fight and I was like, girls, we are losing. And then I was like, oh my god, all the divas can long rest right now. It's totally fine. And then we just whooped ass. I don't know. I'm trying to think of who, like, the other villains in the game are. I think Vlaakith is very funny. I like whenever she shows up and she's like, you are so lame and stupid. I hate you. And you're like, okay. Like, you can just straight up not bow to her when you meet her.
I'm also thinking about the main 3 villains, the little trifecta. of this is no, because their group chat I know is just absolutely abhorrent of Orin, Gortash, and Ketherick. Like, I know it is so dark in there.
I will say, of the three, I think that Ketherick Thorm is my favorite. I think that he's a very like interesting character, but also a fun villain. When you meet him and he opens his mouth and J.K. Simmons starts talking, I was like, I didn't hear a word he said. I was like, Omni-Man, what are you doing here?
Oh my god, I'm like, J.J. Jameson is here? Holy shit.
He's about to throw drumsticks at you and be like, play your part, bitch.
I also like the fact that he is not British, but his daughter is. I'm like, that's iconic. I'm also not gonna lie, after the fight when you like loot him and you find the letter that Isabel wrote to him as a child that's like, I love you, daddy, that kind of got me. Like, I'm not gonna lie, that made me very, very deeply sad.
I really wasn't thinking about that because when I looted him, all I wanted was his clothes. And when I played as a human sorcerer and actually all subsequent characters, I did specifically spec them in certain character upgrades so that they could wear heavy armor just because I wanted to wear that one.
That armor's so ugly.
One, you can dye it, and then it actually, I think, looks a lot nicer. But two, I was like, it's got a fun little hand on the shoulder. I want to walk around with that fun little hand.
That feels like something that you would say.
I think I gave that armor to Shart or Karlach. I can't remember.
Oh, Karlach.
I gave it to Liz in my first playthrough. So Lae'zel was just walking around in Ketherick Thorm's clothes.
I think a lot. You know what else I think is interesting is how every character's sort of backstory plays in. Because there's one guy we haven't really talked about, and that's Gortash. Gortash, I'm kind of obsessed with him. Not in like a, oh my god, he's so hot way. Not in a like, I want him way, which I feel like a lot of the girlies are. But it's like, I think it's very interesting, the conversation that you can have with Karlach about him. Because like the whole thing, and it's really easy to miss, but like the whole thing is that like Gortash's parents basically sold him to Raphael, and that's where he learned to be a wicked little boy. And there's a really interesting conversation you can have with Karlach after you go to the House of Hope, where she's like, you know, maybe Gortash did that to me because, you know, he was just, it happened to him and he's just like perpetuate. Like, she is a very intelligent conversation where she's like, maybe he's just like perpetuating like a cycle of abuse. That sucks. Anyway, it's time to kill him. And I'm like, Karlach is just one of the most, she doesn't have the most dialogue because she is like a late game, like a late in development addition, but she, I think, by far has some of the most interesting and honestly the most like real dialogue. Like, she feels like an actual person, whereas I feel like a lot of the other characters in the game feel like almost like an archetype, and that's not a bad thing. And I do think they're all complex in their own ways and all have like personalities, but I just feel like she feels the most like someone that you would actually feasibly be like having this conversation with.
Karlach has some of the most insane dialogue that I've ever experienced in a video game after you kill Gortash. Like, Emmys and Oscars need to be given out. It's one of the like most heartbreaking scenes in a video game that I've ever experienced, and her voice actress fucking sells it. Like, I don't know. That was one of those scenes that I didn't really see coming, but basically part of Karlach's plot is that she has this engine where her heart should be because she was sold to Zariel, and that's happened to her, and she can no longer stay on this plane of existence without essentially blowing up. Like, at one point it's going to overheat and it will kill her, and she kills Gortash. And if you bring her with for that fight, I don't know what happens if you don't, because I've always had her there. But if you bring her with, she has this moment where she's like, he is dead and nothing is different. Like, I got my revenge. I did this thing that I thought would really help me, and I'm still gonna die, and he's still not sorry. And I'm like, yeah, what if I cried? What then? Like,
No, Samantha Barrett, who plays Karlach, I'm like, first of all, non-binary icon. Second of all, I think it's really interesting how it's like, I don't know, I feel like that is the best performance in the entire game. Like, I know Neil Newbon has won a bunch of awards for Astarion, and don't get me wrong, he gives a really, really amazing performance, but I'm like, their performance as Karlach is so fucking crazy. Like, it's like one of in my like top 5 video game performances like ever.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I feel like, especially because for the like the ratio of lines to like emotional, I don't know, sentimentality, it's wild. It's just like, I don't know. Once again, because I'm not really a hashtag gamer, I don't have a huge frame of reference, but it did feel like a very compelling performance. And I honestly, the choices you have to make about Karlach in the end, I find very, very difficult. And I guess we can kind of use this as a segue in talking about like the big choices of the game. What did you guys decide for Karlach in the end?
I actually, this is funny because when I got to the end, I texted, I can't remember if it was both of you or just Ollie. I don't actually remember. But I was like, I have no idea what the right decision is here. Cause basically, you go to fight the mother brain. That's not her name, but like she is kind of mother. So like, I'm okay with calling her that. You go to fight the mother brain and, essentially you lose the first time. And then the Emperor will get to you. The Emperor is like, so basically one of you / me does need to be fully illithid, because otherwise, well, basically the Emperor is like, a fully illithid person needs to deal with the mother brain. And if you side with him, then it doesn't matter. I think that is personally the wrong choice to make because fuck the Emperor. So you can choose to free Orpheus, and if you do that, then one of your party and or Orpheus has to become an illithid. And Karlach is like, hey, if I become an illithid, I won't explode anymore. I'm not gonna blow up. And I don't know. I was like,
well, she's like, because they don't know that that's gonna get rid of the engine. She is like, her first thing is like, oh, if I'm gonna die anyway, I might as well go out doing something good.
Yeah.
Which is still so fucked up. But then it's like, oh my god, wait, it saved her.
Yeah, so basically either you can become an illithid, or you can make Orpheus do it, or you can let Karlach do it. In all endings of the game that I have played thus far, I have let Karlach become an illithid, because I'm like, I'd rather my girl be a squid than dead. Which, I don't know. I'm curious what you guys did about that, because part of me thinks that it's kind of a cop-out of her story to give this, like, other avenue. Like, I almost feel like it would be more impactful if it's like, these are just the cards that we've been dealt. But I'm also not that mad about it, because I'm like, oh my god, yay, Karlach lives.
I don't disagree. And I do think that, if I'm not mistaken, that ending was added later. So it was like, there were the only endings were ones where she basically, dies or goes back to Avernus. And then they added the ending where she became an illithid after launch, because people were like, she doesn't have a happy ending and we're mad about it. Which is like a thing I really respect, that Larian like listens to what people are saying. But also sometimes I worry they listen a little too much and then add things or take things out that I'm like, oh, you've made Lae'zel a little bit less abrasive. That's kind of the whole point of her in the beginning, but that's not the point right now. But I do kind of agree. I have made her an illithid because I was like, oh my god, like I would feel so bad if I was like, we have this option, but I'm not gonna let you do it. But I do feel like there is something very powerful in, because I think like the conventional wisdom would be like, oh, you should let her go to Avernus so she can live. But the thing is, she continuously says like, I'd rather die than go back to Avernus. So I'm like, I don't know. My plan, because up until the point where it was like, oh, she can become an illithid, my plan was to be like, okay, like, I'm just going to chill with her when the time comes, because, like, I can't justify sending her back there when she clearly is like, I don't want to fucking go back there.
I chose for Karlach to turn into an illithid because I couldn't bring myself to let her get, like, fucked over, essentially. That being said, I think the next playthrough I do, out of curiosity, I definitely want to let her not become the illithid. Mostly because I'm curious about like what the companion character's reactions are to you turning into an illithid, because I've heard that like that can vary depending on like how strong your relationship is, and then also like the nature of your relationship.
I also think it's interesting to consider, this is an interesting thing I found. You can tell that making Karlach like an illithid was like another late addition, because the end of the game, if you have Karlach in your party as an illithid, all of the characters like, the hero is here, and they're not talking about you, they're talking about her, which like I personally am like fine with, because I'm like, yes, she is that girl, but I'm also like, I did all the work. Like, but it's like, it's not about, I think that that's kind of the thing. It's like, okay, well, if you're gonna make her an illithid, like, she's the one who's gonna get all the glory, fuck her. Which is, like, fine. It's just I think it's an interesting thing, because the game clearly was counting on you being an illithid if Orpheus isn't an illithid. So, yeah.
Yeah, I found that really funny, especially because in my playthroughs, with the exception of Eric, I had them turn into a half illithid. And so they're like, oh my god, you're like an illithid. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, but like, I'm a little bit illithid as well. And the problem is that if you have illithid and you have Karlach with you and she's fully illithid, she outpaces you in all the illicit abilities like near instantly. And I was like, what am I here for? Let me conjure a vine, I guess. Like, I don't even care. I'm not even that mad about it.
One other thing I would like to talk about, I feel like we're getting close to the end of our discussion. There are two things I want to talk about. One, I think it's just kind of like, we kind of skirted around it during our discussion, mostly because we were just talking about, like, the story itself. I think one of my gripes with the game is one, unfortunately, due to it being set in the D&D universe in Faerun, fantasy racism for some reason exists. I feel like there was a very easy option, which was to say, let's not do that. Of course, there can be, like, bias and prejudice, but, like, there's a very distinct feeling, especially as someone who's played solely as drow characters. The girlies hate your ass, and they will come for you in a way that is just, like, it's like, I'm experiencing racism right now. I'm getting discriminated against. I can't believe this. What are we doing? And so I feel like that was an unnecessary addition to the game. I don't know. It doesn't do anything particularly for the plot or the overall themes of the story. Like, to some degree, there is something to say that, like, Shadowheart rethinking her prejudices that she has against the Githyanki could have been, like, a very interesting storyline, but they don't really do that. Like, of course, Shadowheart comes to respect Lae'zel, depending on how you play the game, but, like, I don't know. It's not even... Because I also wasn't asking the game to do that, but also, if you're gonna have that storyline, like, you've got to find a way to resolve it in a way that's not just like, oh my gosh, here's Gale, he loves eating boots, Asterion eats blood, and Shadowheart's racist.
I think that song needs to play when you boot up the game.
So true. No, I will say I played as a tiefling twice, and there are a lot of interactions where characters will just straight up be like, you should kill yourself. And you're like,
no, straight up, I feel like they were calling my boy as, like, a slur. Like, I was like, leave him alone. No, that was when I was like, one character I fucking hate, fucking Aridin. He is saying shit to Zevlor. I was like, I'll kill you and your Timothy Chalamet looking ass.
Please. I will say also, I experienced almost the opposite of, well, I experienced racism, but it was like racism that was helpful racism, because when you play as a drow, getting into the goblin camp, they're just like, oh, you're a drow. All of you drow are the same. Come in. You must be Minthar's cousin or something. And it's like, what? Okay. But you can basically, like, do whatever the fuck you want, and they're just like, oh my god, that's yours. That's so okay, whatever. And that's just hilarious to me. Also followed by, in the goblin camp, Priestess Gut tries to, like, poison you or something. Drows cannot be poisoned, So, like, she gives you this, like, sleeping... Or no, they can't be, like, put to sleep. So she gives you, like, this sleeping potion, and you drink it, and she's like, wig. Okay.
That's on her.
Fuck.
That's on her because elves in this universe can't, like, in the D&D universe, do not sleep. They cannot be put to magical sleep. So I'm like, that's on her for being a priestess and not knowing that.
I love that sequence, which I didn't know was a thing in my first playthrough. And then when I was playing as a tiefling warlock, I was like, okay, I'll see where this goes. Like, I'll drink her little potion. And you just, like, wake up in cuffs. However, it is funny because if you do that, you don't have to fight her because she gets smoked by Raphael's little gal who shows up and is like, let me kill. And then she does. And then she frees you and she's like, Raphael says hi. And you can be like, I don't care. I don't like that man. And then, like, walk away. Also, because if you play as it, first of all, I did not know about the drow interactions in the goblin camp. That's actually really fucking funny. If you play as a tiefling and you're in the grove and then later in Last Light, if you choose not to betray the grove, which, like, you should, you can be like, doesn't it suck that everybody hates us? And then everyone's like, yes, it does. And that's, like, the extent of what's happening there. And when you meet the druids in the grove, this is fun. I learned this on my most recent playthrough. If you're playing as a tiefling druid, they literally are like, I didn't know your kind could do that. And you're like, what the fuck?
My kind? I'll have you know. Yeah. No, literally. Yeah, playing a drow is so fun in this game because you'll enter a building, especially, like, in Baldur's Gate, you're like, hey, and they're like, oh my god, look at you, you are so scary. Aren't you guys, like, evil or something? And it's like, no, I'm just Burple. Bye. That was how I played this game, essentially. Yeah, I think I'm trying to think, because I was going to bring up my criticisms of the game besides the fantasy racism. And I think we've also talked about a little bit, like, there's clearly characters who are, like, doted on more by the developers and by the fandom, and get more content in all regards.
Yeah, it's like every patch is like, Shadowheart will now make a funny little comment if you sit next to her on a stool. And then it's like, and none for Wyll Ravengard, bye.
No, literally. Sorry, you were just talking about that interaction, Noah, about the tieflings, and that just reminded me, completely apropos of nothing, one of my favorite lines in the game is when you go to free Wyll's dad from the prison, and you're, like, going down in the sub to the prison, and Gortash, like, FaceTimes you, and it's like, what the fuck are you doing? And one of your options of things to say to him is just, fuck you, Gortash. That was everything to me. I was like, I don't need to have a conversation with this bitch. I don't care what you have to say. I've never cared about what you've had to say.
Quizzy ass
fuck
bitch.
You.
Do you guys ever think about the fact that Grand Inquisitor from Star Wars Rebels is the same voice as the handsome, young, strapping Gortash?
Okay.
That's my other gripe with the game. Why the fuck does he look like that and everyone keeps calling him hot? What?
They're like, he's so handsome and young. Like, he is falling apart.
I love the mods in this game, too, that, like, yassify the characters, like, airbrush them. And I'm like, I'm sorry, why the fuck are you airbrushing Astarion? Why are you getting rid of his wrinkles? Fuck you, you fugly bitch. Also, fun thing I think about a lot, Astarion got changed, and from what, like, speculation says and what we kind of know, is that he was in his, like, late 30s when he got changed. Elves don't reach maturity until they're, like, 100. Shadowheart is older now than Terr was when he got turned. And she's a half-elf. Like, that shit is crazy.
I just, you brought up mods, and that reminded me. So I played this game on a PlayStation 5, so I obviously did not have any mods for it, but I saw a lot of clips of people who modded their characters. Specifically, there is a really, really fun trend of people modding when they make a Dark Urge character, and they're like, oh, he's, like, really evil, and, like, it's like a twink with the worst hair you've ever seen. They look fucking sane, and I love it because the people, I'll say this, the Venn diagram of people who ascend Astarion after romancing him and people who mod their Dark Urge characters is a circle. It's always, it's like, people are like, I want Dami, Ascended Astarion, but also I want like the full tilt commitment to Ball, Dark Urge, who looks insane and is wearing like eyeliner out to their ears. I love it. I think it's so stupid. I love it. I also like someone modded someone made Fiona in this game, like from Shrek, and they modded, I can't remember what it was, like it's one of the like elementals you can summon, but they fully modded it as Shrek, and so they're like running around this fucking game with Shrek behind them at all times.
I love that.
So true. One thing I also wanted to talk about, I just remembered we said we were going to talk about this. Let's talk about that fucker, the emperor. That bitch. He's like, I never lied to you. He says, if he is like, I never lied to you. You're lying right now. Like, you're actively lying to me, dog. I don't know what to tell you. I was also like so gagged when he was like, I'm actually Baldurin. I was like, oh my god, no one cares. Fuck you.
Okay, the Baldurin reveal. So I did that quest, which is where you go fight this big ass dragon. I did that. I want to say it was like the second to last thing I did in the game. And so at that point, I was like, literally, who cares? We have bigger problems to deal with. I don't give a fuck that you founded a city, you stupid squid loser. But he's so, yeah, he's like, I would never lie to you. And it's like, you've been lying from genuinely minute one. And then at the end of the game, he's like, I do think you should leave the Githyanki to be enslaved by Vlaakith for all eternity. And when you're like, no, that's like a bad idea, he's like, kill yourself. And he runs away immediately and joins up with the Mother Brain and then fights you. He also does try to fuck you. And some people did choose to go through with that option. And by some people...
But no one here, right?
Yeah, I would never do that on multiple
no one,
instances. I would never.
Hey, Noah, what... Did you... Just quick question. Did you...
No.
Did you maybe... Did you...
I did.
Maybe have relations with that man?
I did not. I did not have relations with that squid. Yeah.
Oh, I don't like the Bill Clinton direction this conversation is taking.
No. I did sleep with the Emperor in one of the playthroughs because I thought it would be funny, and I was right. You cuddle with him afterwards, which is insane. The one thing I will say, one of my, like, I guess this isn't totally like a criticism of that sequence, but there are no consequences to doing that, even if you cheat on the person you're actively romancing. And not like there are no big consequences. Like, it's never brought up again for the rest of the game. You guys fuck in the astral plane and no one talks about it for the remainder of the game, except if you free Orpheus and you fucked the Emperor, he will tell you that you're gross and disgusting for fucking an Illithid. And no one else remarks upon this when he's like, I can't believe you slept with an Illithid. And then the rest of the characters are like, I don't know what he just said. That's crazy. Like, they have no responses.
The Emperor, oh my god. First of all, I knew his ass was suspicious from the jump. So I was never particularly buddy with him. Going so far as to trying to murk his ass early on in the game. That didn't work out very great. It was still when he was the Dream Guardian. Hashtag awkward. But I just his motivations, he just is so mysterious and unknowable to me. I'm just like, bitch, can you just like get a real job? Like, can you get on LinkedIn? I need you to do something else than whatever this mess is.
I just remembered something about the Wyll romance. This is not related to the Emperor in any way, thank God, but one thing I find very funny about the Wyll romance, which notably I did first, so I thought they were all like this, but no. You can, like, make out with Wyll nasty style constantly, and that gentleman, to the end of the game, is going, well met. That's all he says to you. The other girlies are like if you're romancing Shadowheart, she actually has some really cute lines for when you're like walking up and saying hi to her, but they actually acknowledge that it's happening. With Wyll, you guys basically fuck, and he's like, hey friend. I'm like, is this Brokeback Mountain? Am I trying to figure out how to quit you? Like, I'm so confused by what's happening here. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that.
No.
But also, fuck the Emperor. He's like, you're so strange and vague. Why are you always sending me into death traps and then being like, I don't know, man, beats me. The Emperor is like low-key a Scooby-Doo villain. That's my hot take on him. He's low-key a character that the Scooby Gang would have to deal with.
And then they pull off the mask and he's just a shitty, powerful man. Literally. Except he eats brains in this one.
Yeah.
He does do that.
He does eat brains, yeah.
No, I gotta say, I know we're kind of like, we interrupted that talk about criticisms of the game to talk about the Emperor. I do think, like I had said, like we alluded to, like the biggest criticism I have of the game is the lack of content for Wyll, and is how it just feels like he was kind of an afterthought. And like I do get, like, part of it is like, oh, I know they reworked the story, I know they did that, but it's like that's still kind of no excuse to have like to shaft him so much. And then it's like, oh, well, fans aren't demanding that. And I'm like, well, first of all, fans are notorious for not treating Black characters with the respect they deserve. But the other thing too is if you have so little content for him, it kind of makes sense why people flock to other characters. Like, I'm not saying that it's like okay when people leave Wyll out of their fan art or anything, because I think that's still really shitty. But it's like, I understand why people are so quick to fixate on these other characters, because there's so much more to learn about them. And it's like, I love Wyll's romance, I love everything about him, but there's really good bones there, but there's no payoff. And I just saw a Twitter thread about it, like right before we started recording, about how it's like, yeah, because Wyll has so few scenes, he'll go from being like really upset about something to being like, this is great, to be like, he has like this huge like emotional roller coaster in every subsequent conversation because there's no bridge to get him from point A to point B like the other characters have.
I will say, I think one of my other critiques of this game, this is unrelated to William, but kind of, because I remembered this really coming up in, like I mentioned earlier, Ollie and I would play, like, not tandem, but like in shifts essentially, and they got to the scene with Harleap much earlier than I did, and it made me uncomfortable, that scene, that, like, I don't know, there was just like some weird stuff regarding consent and like the lack thereof in that scene. Like, if there was a way to opt out of that entirely, because like, of course there is a way to opt out, you just fight Harleap immediately, but like, as a player, I knew what I was going into because I saw Ollie's playthrough where, like, essentially Harleap is like, I'm gonna fuck you now.
And it was also one of those things, is there's a point where you can revoke consent once you've kind of started, and I was like, you know what, actually I don't want to do this, and I did click like to try, but you have to roll a check for it that my character failed. So I was like, well, wow, and all my friends are just standing there watching this happen. Thanks, guys. Awesome. That whole scene is just really weird. I think it's like like, I get the idea of it, and I feel like there are probably better ways to execute it. It's like the execution just came across as really like, wow, this is super leaning
rapey.
Into, it's really rapey. And the other thing too is it's like Harleap is like kind of implied to be like, not necessarily implied, it's pretty clear, and correct me if I'm wrong, but is like definitely in service to Raphael, like is not there like because they chose to be there. So I'm like, Raphael does have like a sex slave, so, and we're all just you know, I mean, I know that the game is not necessarily endorsing doing that because Raphael is a bad guy, but it is one of those things where I'm just like, oh, I really wish we had maybe, you know, examined that a little more, if not in the game, at least as the fans, to be like, whoa, this is like, I think that it's good that not everything is spoon-fed to you, but I also think it's kind of weird because some things in this game are spoon-fed to you, so I'm like, we need to decide, are we spoon-feeding or are we not?
Yeah, I will say one sort of funny thing about the whole Harleap moment while you're in the House of Hope is if you're half a Lithid, and you can levitate places. So your mobility is pretty increased. You can levitate your way into that room and skip over the rest of it and leave all your companions behind. Do the whole weird sex slave thing, and then fly back, and no one comments on it. And nobody knows it happened, and you can't even address it in dialogue either. Like, you're just like, I got a password, moving on, I guess.
Yeah, no. And it's what, even if they are there, they don't even say anything. There may be one person who's like, are you really going to do this? And that's it.
Yeah,
hey guys.
It's interesting. Honestly, the whole part of the game, I'm like, there's a lot going on here.
I will say this is kind of separate, but something that did also happen in that scene that I realized. I was playing as a tiefling, right? And I noticed that he had sharp fingernails, because I guess that's just what tieflings have. But it was really funny because Harleap is doing their dirty business, and the camera pans down to your character's feet, and my tiefling had the longest, sharpest toenails I've ever seen. And I was like, what the fuck? We gotta do something about that. That is not good. I was off put by that more than anything else in this entire game. I was like, we need to be able to adjust that, because that is not gonna fly. That's not canon to my character. That is horrible. Imagine having really sharp toenails. Oh my god. Sick and twisted. Sick and fucking twisted.
Frightening
and sick
stuff.
And twisted that you would make me see that, Larian.
Yeah. I can't remember what my character's toenails looked like, but who's to... Oh, I mean, toenails, no, but when I was playing as Eric, the human sorcerer, I didn't like the pajamas that they gave him because it looked like a suit, and I was like, why would he wear this to bed? It does not look comfortable at all. But I never at any point realized that you could just go and buy other clothes to sleep in. So I just had him basically ass out at all times, no matter what was happening. Including when fucking Kithrak Voss shows up and is like, Slay, which reminds me of the best Baldur's Gate edit ever made. I think we all know the one that I'm talking about.
Yeah, it is one. It is that scene. That scene is so fucking good, where you're trying to go to sleep and you open your eyes and Kithrak Voss is just staring down at you. That is the biggest jump scare ever.
Yeah, he just shows up and is like, hey everyone. But it is deeply funny because Eric had basically his cock and balls out, and Kithrak Voss is like, we have to kill Vlaakith, we have to liberate our people, and my human sorcerer is like, I'm so sorry my nipples are just exposed to the world right now, you guys. My bad. What a beautiful game. You can be tits out all the time in this game if you want. There is never a requirement to put your tits away, and I think that that's beautiful.
Have you ever seen that clip and it's Gale when you're wearing, I think it's there's a pair of underwear, there's an outfit you can get, and you walk up to Gale while wearing it and he's like, oh, you decided to get comfortable today. Anyway, what's on your mind?
That's crazy. Wow.
Gale I like the idea of Gale being the only character who's aware. So it's if your character's naked, he's like, is anyone else going to react to the fact that this dude's balls are out? Is it just me?
Does anyone else?
Am I the only one who's seeing this?
I'm just, there are no clothes. We can't afford clothes. I do like that some of the characters will occasionally commentate upon the weird food that you eat when you long rest. Shadowheart has a line of dialogue where she's like, we had to eat 18 fish heads, 2 bottles of wine, and 4 loaves of stale bread for dinner. And I'm like, I'm sorry that I can't afford nicer food right now.
Also, the fact that Gale is the designated cook canonically is so fucking funny. I'm just imagining him in his year of depression in Waterdeep, where he's just well, I guess I'm just gonna cook huge meals for just me because there's nothing else for me to do. And then
Gale let him cook Dicarios.
Let him cook, literally. Ugh. Oh, Gale, you fucker. Guys, remember when Elminster shows up and is like, Gale, I gotta eat all your cheese here. Also, Mystra wanted me to tell you to kill yourself.
That scene, also, unfortunately, in my brain, I've edited this entire sequence where I can only see it with the mod Elminster's Big Naturals installed, so just Elminster with huge tits being like, Mystra did tell me to tell you to commit suicide imminently. Thank you. Have a great rest of your night.
Yeah.
That scene also is just so funny to me. Sorry. This just reminded me because Elminster's like, okay, Gale, I bestow upon you power of kill yourself. And then you just like have a spell that if you click it, he explodes and kills everyone. I specifically remember this because I was...
Sorry, I just remembered the story you're gonna tell.
I was in the sewers of Baldur's Gate, and there's a scene where, oh my god, what is her name? Orin, like, disguises herself as one of your companions and, like, kidnaps them, and she, like, tricks you, because she's like, oh my god, it's me, Halsin. Just kidding, it's me, Orin. I've kidnapped Halsin from you.
No, it was Lae'zel who'd been kidnapped in your game.
It was Lae'zel for me, but I just was saying, so I was in the sewers and Lae'zel runs up on me and is like, oh my god, it's so fucked up. I got, like, oh my god, it's so bad. It's me, Orin. And I was trying to, like, click through the dialogue and I don't know if it was, like, clicked too fast or the computer was lagging a little bit, but essentially what had happened was I clicked through that dialogue and then clicked Gale's kill yourself button. So the conversation ended and Gale exploded.
And it's like, he's like, oh my god, they took Lae'zel. I can't live anymore. No! My best friend.
I also have accidentally pressed the Gale suicide button in a couple fights before. And I remember, and then after that I was like, I should really redesign these dials, because I had put, like, magic missile right next to it, and I use that spell all the time. I was like, oh fuck, Gale, please. And it would be like,
no.
I think it was in, like, one of the earlier fights in Act 3, which is like, oh yeah. It was against the landlord who was like, kill yourself. These people can't stay here. And Gale was like, no, and blew himself up.
I think about the Gale origin that I did, where I've done the first, like, maybe 6 or 7 hours of the game. And I love that it's like, if you play as Gale's so pathetic, and that's why I love him. And I think Tim Downey, the actor who plays him, really captured that. He's like the perfect balance between being like, oh, I'm so cool and suave, but I'm also just a fucking loser. But it's so good because if you play Gale Origin, Tara shows up at your camp and is like, your mom thinks that you fucking abandoned her. I missed you. I was worried about you. What the fuck is going on? Also, shave your beard. You look like shit. And then she also is like, you are the most capable person I know. I'm like, why is this gonna make me cry right now? Remembering she's not talking to me, she's talking to the character. Calm down. But I could also talk about Gale's story all day, about being like, yeah, he is learning that he has worth even when he is not Mistress Chosen, even when he feels like he doesn't, he still has worth. And I'm like, that is such a character learning, that, like, learning to have a will to live is such a good story in my mind. I just love that.
Yeah, speaking of Mistress Chosen, did you guys let Volo take your eye out and give you a lobotomy?
No.
Did you know that you could do that?
Yes.
Oh, I totally did. I was like, well, I guess I can see invisibility all the time now. That's great. That's cool. Wig, I don't know. Are we ready for, like, some sort of closing remarks? Because I think I got, like, everything across.
I think so. I think a good final question is, what is your favorite part of the game? Like, do you have, like, a fight or, like, a character interaction, anything like that you're like, this is, if you're gonna play the game, this is my moment. This was my crowning moment.
Sure. I feel like Act 1 is just so special in so many ways, and I think, like, the whole tiefling situation, like, the whole resolution of, like, the tiefling versus the grove arc is so good, and that party is so fun. But another thing that I really like is, like I feel like all of the parts of the game are so good, One thing that I really like, that I just remembered, I don't know if this is my answer, but sorry, I have to say this before I say my answer. You know what was really fucked up in this game is when you're just like trying to live your life and Halsin's like, ah yes, when I was a child, I used to play with a boy named Thaniel. And you're like, oh, Halsin's definitely dreaming and is like just talking about some crazy shit that happened to him as a kid. And then that random dude who you find out in the woods is like, oh, Thaniel. And you're like, oh my god, Thaniel's real? Thaniel's like actually a real person. Oh shit. I thought Halsin was just delusional. No, but I think if I had to pick like a favorite part of the game, I feel like honestly, I know I keep harping on it, but I feel like a lot of the stuff with Auntie Ethel is really good. Like it kind of symbolizes like the heart of the story, but it's all like where it's like, oh, you have to save this character and, you know, teach someone that they're, you know, like Mayrina has a very interesting arc where she comes to like be like, I'm liberated and I am learning and I'm realizing that I am worth more than I thought I was and that I can do this. And I loved that. Ethel's just such a fucked up character. Like that whole part is so fun. And it's also so Dungeons and Dragons where it's like, you've got this goofy old woman who's like, I'm an evil witch and I'm eating children. Like, it's just so good.
I think if I had to pick like favorite moments in the game, because I don't know if I could really narrow it down to one of them is Ketheric Thorm's introduction. I think it actually is like incredibly cool and fun, where he pulls a fucking halberd out of his neck and is like, try again. Like, first of all, such a J.K. Simmons line. Like, I just like felt like he was born to say that. But I like that whole sequence of Act 2, and the assault on Moonrise Towers is also really fun, provided that you did not let the last light in crumble and fall to the shadow curse, which some in the chat with us now may have done by accident their first time. But like rushing Moonrise with like all the Harpers and all like a lot of the characters that you've met throughout the game is really fun. I will say, perhaps cliche, but one of my favorite moments in the game is the ending. Like that last fight against the Netherbrain where any and all of your previous allies like come together to help you. You can summon them in combat. All your characters are at their most powerful. Like it was a very like fun final experience. And the little epilogue garden party that you have was a good time. And a lot of the characters' resolutions felt very earned. Some of them made more sense than others, but I feel like in the end, all the characters end in a place where I'm like, that makes sense for the choices that we made over the course of the story. So yeah, I would say that. I think that's also like, yeah, Auntie Ethel, she calls you a clever clog. What a beautiful name. I love that.
I have a couple of favorite moments of the game. I think in terms of like heartfelt moment, going to Jaheira's house in Act 3, I don't know, I just was like, it was so much fun. I also just love Jaheira, and I liked that even though I haven't played, you know, the first two Baldur's Gate games, like the inclusion of that lore and like just seeing that development of her character, and also just like getting to see that she has all these like little gremlin children and she's a shitty mom. It was just kind of funny. But I love that. Also, he is the GOAT of this game. I have to say it. Barkus Root. Everything I do is for you, King. You are the baddest bitch of them all. I don't care. Talk to the wall. He's just so good. And like, it's so fucked up that you can just kill him and not have to interact with him for the rest of the game, because he's like my best friend. When I say best friend, like he gets me in a way that other people just don't. He's nosy and he has homoerotic feelings for his friend who's not really his friend but he thinks is his friend. And he's just like, oh my god, yes. And I just love that for him. I'm trying to think if there's another part of this game that is particularly...
There's one I just thought of that's a fucking awesome part of the game, which is when you're like we haven't mentioned him this entire time, but when you first meet Minsk and he introduces you to Boo.
Fuck yes. Fuck yes.
And he's like, just that whole introduction is so fucking funny. It's too good. And I'm like, oh my god, jump scared by Matt Mercer.
Boo.
Ah!
Thank you so much for joining us this week for RuPalp's Pod Race, and thank you again for sticking with our new series. RuPalp's Day Off will drop episodes every 2 weeks for the foreseeable future, but make sure you're following us on Instagram, Tumblr, TikTok, and unfortunately Twitter at RuPalp's Pod Race for updates. Keep an eye out for the announcement of the topic of our next day off, and if you want to ask us a question, you can send them to our Tumblr Ask Box or email us at rupalpspodrace@gmail.com. And if you really love the show, please rate and review it on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Spotify, Overcast, and any other podcatcher that allows ratings, and tell a friend who might be interested. It really helps the show, especially while we try this new series. If you'd like to hear more of us, you can hear Jess as one of our cast members on the High Republic Tabletop RPG podcast for Light and Dice, and listen to the Mysteries podcast, where Claudia and Ollie recap all of Supernatural so that you'll never watch it. And links to both of those podcasts are in our show notes. May the Force be with you, and don't kriff it up. Waka waka.
Waka waka.